Hey everyone, you're listening to Yonder Lies. This is Hannah Haberman. I hope this finds you well and in good health, wherever you might be. Since Jesse shared his research on the relationship between rock climbing and the small ranching town of Ten Sleep, Wyoming a little bit ago, I figured I should share a little something too. So this week, it's just gonna be me. Today I'd like to share with you a story I wrote as part of my senior thesis in college. I was an environmental studies and creative writing major, and I was, pretty preoccupied with the ways in which the American West has been, and continues to be, constructed, represented, and understood in stories, images, and, you guessed it, myths. Makes sense why I'm making this podcast, right? My senior thesis was called The Space is Not Empty, and was a collage of poetry, photography, fiction, and nonfiction. The stories wandered through distorted pasts, unpolished presents, and potential futures in the American West, juxtaposing the romanticized, idealized West and the realities of where this region, and much of our world, is headed in the face of unprecedented change. It was an exercise in asking this question: how do the stories we tell about a place influence our memory, our reality, and the choices we make moving forward? As someone who grew up in Montana, writing this collection was both deeply personal and also inspired by a deep and unshakable concern about the changes I'll see in my lifetime for the people and places I love. Whether it be raging wildfires, boom and bust economies, amenity tourism, or continued conflict over land, water, and cultural identity, amidst unprecedented sprawl and population growth, these spaces are changing, the people who call them home are changing, and the space is not empty. Our stories are not empty. Also, just a quick heads up, if you haven't caught on yet. What I'm going to be reading is fiction, so if you're expecting our usual historical, current event shtick, you're in for something a little different. This story, in particular, turns its attention to drought. There's no doubt that water, and its absence, are deeply tangled with and stitched into the fabric of the American West. A little less than a month ago, a new study in the journal Science reported that the current 2-decade-long dry spell taking place in the western U.S. is one of the longest and driest megadroughts in the last 12 centuries. That's 1,200 years. And as you might expect, the article goes on to report that nearly half of this drought can be attributed to human-caused climate change. When you start looking into the impacts of a future where megadroughts are normal, it gets pretty spooky pretty quick. America's desert will grow even drier, and our ecosystems, agricultural systems, cities, and very ways of life will have to look, by necessity, very different. It will be, quite simply, a matter of life or death for many. I wrote this piece imagining what water availability and accessibility might look like in the West in 30 years. As I was writing, I thought about how climate change is such a large-scale and existentially challenging phenomenon that, if our current policies are any indication, it almost seems to exceed the human capacity for understanding. It's easy to get lost in the science of it, in the projections of the future, in the facts. Sometimes we can get caught up in the abstraction of it, how it's not happening now, so we think. In this story, I wanted to explore how an American West where the water finally ran out would feel, how it would be experienced, understood, lived in by a single person, by a body, by somebody, by someone with memories and family and dreams and sorrows. This is the story of a woman named Theresa, recorded as part of an imagined project studying the embodied impacts of drought on the human condition. For her, the grief and the gravity of this potential future completely and irreconcilably changes the very way she can communicate about her world. Sometimes when the implications of something are so powerful, so devastating, so incomprehensible, it's all we can talk about, even if there's a million little experiences churning underneath the surface. The story opens with a poem by British writer Stevie Smith called Not Waving But Drowning, and shares its title with this poem, published in 1957. It was a big inspiration as I wrote this piece, as was my mom, who shaped me, shaped this story, and shaped the water I swim in. I hope you enjoy. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him, his heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, 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 it was too cold always. Still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. Not Waving But Drowning by Hannah Haberman. A case study on the impacts of the drought on individual experience, recorded at the International Center for Crisis and Recovery, as told by Theresa Billings on May 7th, 2048. Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? God, I haven't seen one of these for years. Well, anyway, I hope it's working. I hit play and all the lights and stuff are on, so it must be. Hopefully you can hear me, I guess. My laugh sounds really strange in this room. Sorry. Okay, well, where do I start? I'm not quite sure where the beginning really is, where all of this started. Maybe it makes sense to start with this woman they always used to talk about. Well, since part of this whole program I'm in here is trying to be more honest and verbalizing, they say, I guess I should say that the woman they always used to talk about was me. The water woman. That's what they called me. It sounds like it could have been a nice thing, like how they used to talk about the milkman or the person who delivered the post when they used to do that sort of stuff, but I don't really think that's how they meant it. Maybe that was part of it, but I don't really think so. I don't think it was really a nice thing. They never thought that I could hear them when they walked past, but I definitely could. They'd say to each other, "Have you heard about this lady, the one who walks up and down the sidewalk? All she can say is 'water, please,' over and over and over again. 'Water, please,' and lots of it. Everybody always has to tell her, 'I'm sorry, ma'am, there's just no more. There's no more water.' And on they'd go like that, talking to their friends about me, like I couldn't really hear them. Yeah, it was the kids on the street, but it was grown-ups too. Folks in suits, folks coming home from work, older people who were older than me. And they all just thought I couldn't hear them. A bit of a bummer, right? Well, anyway, back to the beginning. I guess it all started the day it rained the most it ever had in that town where we all grew up in together. Something like 3 inches a day. It sounds like so much in comparison to what we're used to now. I know. But you can look it up in the records. I swear to God it happened. 3 inches a day. Everybody was hoping things were turning around because of that day, that big event, but it seemed like the sky gave way pretty much everything it had then. And that was kind of the end of it. After that, really no more rain. So I guess that's when the bigger things started happening to everyone, and I think everywhere. But this thing with me, it all started when the last reservoir down south ran out. I remember that day so clearly. I was walking down West Yellowstone Street, going from the laundromat back to the office where I used to work. I wanted to get some fresh air that day, so that's why I was walking, because the weather was so beautiful out. Unseasonably warm, really. I must have been picking up replacement parts or something, maybe for one of those faulty automated workers that was always breaking down. And I walked past the screen that was hanging in the storefront window, back when they still sold things in person, the one that was always playing the news a little bit too loud. And that's exactly what I heard coming out of the TV, that the last reservoir down south had finally run out. And that's when it happened, this thing. It was so strange. All of a sudden, my mouth turned bone dry, like some sort of huge desert, like what all the fields had turned into. My throat like one of those white straws with the colored stripes that bend at the top, but only I'm pulling and pulling and pulling and nothing's ever coming out. It took so much out of me so quickly, this pulling, this dryness, this absence. Have you ever had something hit you so hard you crumple onto the pavement? I couldn't get my fingers to uncurl from the fist clenched tightly against my chest. I couldn't push the muscles in my mouth to move and make words. No water, no air. It was the same thing, really. It was like stepping into the kind of quicksand they always joke about in movies, where the person in the front steps in and never comes back out. At that point, the only thing I could do was scream. So I did that for a while. I knew it wasn't all that ladylike or proper. I knew I was making a scene, but I forgot what any of those words meant. I forgot everything, and all I could see was the cutting hot red that comes from the absence of blue. No water, no air. Same thing, really. After a while, the screaming got pretty tiring. After a while, I could see past the red. Well, actually, it was more like when you've been in the dark long enough that your eyes start adjusting. I kept feeling surprised that no one came out to see what was going on, why I was screaming, but they were probably just dealing with the news in their own ways. Or maybe it didn't bother them. Maybe they weren't thinking about what it all meant. I tried to say different words over and over again, like help, like what's going on, like can someone fix this? But they kept coming out in this garbled mess where they just sounded like some sort of gibberish. The weight of a loss like that, of what it all meant, about what things would look like now that the reservoir had run out. The magnitude of it all coated me like thick molasses. I could feel all the stuck words slamming like waves against the inside of my ribs, cracking my bones as they tossed themselves against my body underneath the pressure. I tried to say so many words. Tried to say the names of all the people I loved, the town I was born in. I tried to say blackberry and all the other things that were still on my grocery list, and I could not. And then, water. It came out just like that, tumbling off my lips and into the empty air. I tried again. Water, water, please. That worked. I could say it. And that was all I could say. So that's what I said. Water, please. And lots of it, too. I found a few days later I could say this, and lots of it.
Water, please.
It could push its way out of my mouth, but as hard as I tried,
water, please.
that
and
was
lots
it.
of it. Water.
Water, please. And lots of it.
Support for Yonder Lies comes from Wildlife Expeditions of Teton Science Schools. For over 20 years, Wildlife Expeditions has been leading educational wildlife tours in Jackson Hole, Grand Teton, and Yellowstone National Parks. To see wildlife and support education, visit wildlifeexpeditions.org.
Support for Yonder Lies comes from Think WY, Wyoming Humanities. Wyoming Humanities supports programs, grants, and initiatives in Teton County and across Wyoming that explore history, culture, and the human experience. To learn more about the Wyoming Humanities Council, visit thinkwy.org. Again, that's thinkwy.org.
And that's why I'd been walking up and down that sidewalk, trying to talk to people, to tell them what was happening, to tell them what it might all mean. And all that could come out was water, please, and lots of it. And it wasn't like there was anyone to know that I hadn't come home. The way we all live now, so separate, no one knew. And that's where I was when y'all came up in that big car and picked me up and brought me here. Maybe the logic's not totally there, but I figured if I stayed there on that sidewalk for long enough, maybe things would go back to normal. If I said water, please, and lots of it enough, things could go back to normal. But they didn't go back to normal, and there wasn't really any reason to go back home. I thought maybe the rain would fall, thought maybe we'd find another source for us to draw from. Maybe the words would start coming out again and I could say anything but water, please, and lots of it.
Water.
And I waited.
Water, please, and lots of it.
And it
Water.
didn't. The rain didn't fall. People took pity on me, gave me the pills that could keep me going without water, and I tried. When I was walking up and down that street, that sidewalk, I did a lot of remembering, even while I was screaming and saying, water, please, water, please,
Water.
and lots of
Water,
it.
please, and lots of it.
Most of the time, I ended up thinking about that place we all used to go to at the end of the summer. We always called it Sun Canyon, even though I'm never quite sure if that's what it was actually called. The two of us, we bought that place together. From the time where there are pictures of us with our faces bright and close together, you in that wool sweater you knitted and my arms wrapped around your waist. Before you moved to that new apartment and we stopped talking and I put all your cutting boards and newspaper clippings into a box outside the house. How carefully we composed our loneliness. How carefully we created our distance. I loved that little place. That little cabin we bought together with the bunk beds and the foosball table upstairs. The screen door that always got slammed shut too loudly. I loved driving those long dirt roads that wound west out of Augusta on the way up to the mountains, with the four-wheel drive pickup trucks and their two-fingered tobacco-stained waves as the cars passed each other. How we ate huckleberry ice cream from the diner that dripped onto our laps as we drove. It didn't get smoky there quite as quickly as it ended up doing in all those other places. So, for a while, you could still go outside in July. After we ate breakfast, we'd walk down the path to the river, the one with all the trees where the caterpillar nests stretched like gossamer between the branches of the shrubs. Have you ever seen pussy willows before? Y'all who are listening to this? They used to grow there. I'd always make us stop the car when we drove past, make everyone unbuckle and get out and press the funny squishy ends against our faces. Like little pills of white silk, softer than any piece of clothing I'd ever tried on. When I was walking up and down that sidewalk, that street, I'd think about other times we were there too. Sometimes we'd go there in the winter when there was snow in some Decembers and it felt like endless winter. That was when the seasons used to be different, when the snow would eventually slide off the tin roof in thin sheets like white birds falling back into gravity. It was so beautiful how it would sparkle in the sun. We'd go down to the river with the kids, taking big sticks and hitting them against the sheets of ice covering the lake. The ice so thick it would take all of our strength combined to make even the smallest hole, putting our heads close to the water surface to listen for the fish just below. The kids even used to make some kind of competition about it, pretending like they were running their own fishing companies, trying to bring home the most. It was sweet. And then I spent some time remembering
That one afternoon I stayed in the river too long, which I guess is actually why I'm going on and on about this. I wanted to tell you about it. Y'all who I guess are going to be listening to this and hopefully learning something about my experience. I think it was important. Maybe I didn't know it at the time, how much things changed. After I stayed in the river too long, everyone started to look at me kind of funny. Dean watched me a little closer, and the ladies at work started to whisper behind their hands during our lunch breaks. You have to believe me on this one, okay? I tried to tell them, no, I'm fine. I just wanted to go for a nice long swim. There wasn't anything wrong, I promise. It was something I'd done before, swimming in the reservoir, out in between the two big dams that bookended both sides of the canyon. I was wearing that swimsuit that I like to wear so much, the black one piece with the white flowers curling up the side. I always felt self-conscious about the ways my hairs would poke out from the seams down there, how I didn't look like all the other women I saw in magazines. But none of that mattered when I was in the water. It just felt so good, you know? How it moved all over you, how it let you go. Were you ever able to float in the snowmelt that came out of the mountains before it went away? It was the best kind of forgetting. The water's so cold, my muscles seized up when I would slip in, then grow numb, and I just floated like that, sometimes looking at the blue in the sky, sometimes watching the water trace its way across the hollow of my belly. I didn't have to think about Dean or the kids or anything else. It was quiet enough that I could hear my own thoughts. I could escape. I could just be. It must have been something like an hour later when Dean came running down to the riverbank, pulled me out of the water because my muscles were too cold to move. I don't know how he knew I was there. Blue lips, blue skin, shaking so much I thought my teeth would knock each other right into my skull. I don't remember much of it, but Dean likes to tell the stories. But even when he was yelling at me, even when the feeling came back in my skin like a million needles crocheting fire all across my body, it felt so good. It felt so good. I wanted to be back in it. How when my ears were underwater, everything went all hushed and muffled. I don't get why he told everyone about it, even the kids. It was just my own private thing. I guess he was worried. I guess I get that. It was just when things were starting to get scary for everybody. And we all act so differently when we get scared. When we think things might be going away. But still, I just wanted to go swimming. I just wanted some quiet for a bit. But anyway, I know while I've been recording this, y'all have been watching me through the windows. And I know you've been watching me do this while I'm in here, this screaming and speaking and crumpling on the tiled floor thing, and I know it looks bad. I promise. I really am feeling quite calm inside, even while I'm recording this, and I know even though it might look different to you on the other side of the glass, I get what it looks like I've lost my mind, like I can't say anything besides water, please, and lots of it. But look, I guess this is what happens when you haven't had any water for years, when I've been living here. Even though they figured out how to keep us all alive with that little pill we take every morning, and they say we don't need water, but we do. It's funny. I'd forgotten about this until now. One day, a woman walked past me on the sidewalk who was talking into her earpiece. Those high-tech new ones that didn't even have cords. She was one of those fancier women with big earrings and her hair still somehow looking clean and washed, done up all nice. And she said to whoever it was she was talking to in that earpiece, she said, "It hasn't stopped raining down in Boulder for months." Now, I don't quite know where that is, what where she was talking about, but it doesn't matter. What matters was that it was raining, or at least it was then. But somehow we were all still parched all the way through. Who was getting it? Who's still getting it? If no one here is, who's deciding who gets what and where? Who's deciding how? Who? Really? Believe me, I know what I heard. I know she said it hasn't stopped raining for months. Where is that water? Who's getting it? Oh. They're signaling at me through the window to stop now. The folks at the window, the one who are doing this study in the first place to figure out how the drought impacted us in our minds, I guess. In my body too. I don't know how to separate them. But anyway, I'm sorry. It's been so nice to talk to someone. Even though I guess I haven't really been talking to anyone at all.
Water, please,
this microphone.
and lots of it.
But I hope this is helpful to whoever needs this, to whatever they need it for. I hope you can understand me.
Lots of it.
I know sometimes my words get a little garbled and
lots
maybe
of it.
It sounds like I'm saying something else besides
water, please, and lots
what
of
I'm saying,
water.
But I think it's important you know what I'm really trying to say.
And lots of it.
In my own words.
Water.
What I'm trying to say.
Please.
Oh, okay. I really am turning it off now. I'm sorry. The people who brought me in here are coming back into the room. They don't look really happy. They're covering their ears now. They've got something in their hands. Like they're going to tie me up.
Water, please, and lots
Thanks
of
for
it.
listening, I guess. Bye.
Water, please.
Recording 2. A case study on the impacts of the drought on individual experience. Recorded at the International Center for Crisis and Recovery. As told by Theresa Billings on May 7th, 2048. Audio transcribed by FEMA employee number 00594-904. Water, please, and lots of it. Water, please, and lots of it. Water, please, and lots of it. Water, please, water, lots of it. Water, please, and lots of it. Water, please, and lots of it.
Technical support comes from Jackson's community radio station, KHOL 89.1, and the Northern Rockies Conservation Cooperative. A big thanks to the Jackson Hole Historical Society for providing access to hours of archival audio. Special shout out to Doug Haberman for our theme music and Becca Holt-Hewson for our beautiful cover art.
If you haven't already, please rate and subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. And if you'd like to support the show with a small monthly donation, visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/yonderlies. That's patreon.com/yonderlies.